At first glance, an egg layer operation looks like one of the purest, most mechanical cash printing machines in the agricultural sector. You buy chicks, feed them grain, collect eggs daily, and sell a staple food product that literally every demographic buys, regardless of macroeconomic conditions. The demand curve is perpetually inelastic. The inventory turns over every 24 hours, and the production unit, a biological organism, works 7 days a week without overtime pay. It looks like passive income with feathers, but that surface-level simplicity is a complete illusion. An egg production farm is not an agricultural business. It is a high-velocity biosecurity arbitrage engine operating on sub-cent margins, where you take massive upfront capital risks to sell a highly perishable commodity into an opaque, hyper-volatile spot market. You are not a farmer. You are an energy converter who transforms thousands of tons of volatile commodity grain into protein while constantly battling biological degradation, thermal stress, and predatory retail consolidation. To understand this industry, you first have to throw out the nostalgic image of a red barn and free-roaming hens. The modern layer industry exists on a hyper-segmented operational spectrum, dictated entirely by a trade-off between volume scale and margin extraction. At the baseline level, you have conventional battery cage operations. These are ultra-cap intensive, ultra-high volume facilities, housing hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, of birds. Margins here are microscopic, often measured in fractions of a cent per egg, and survival depends entirely on absolute throughput and feed conversion efficiency. Step up one tier, and you hit cage-free housing systems, followed by free-range, and finally certified pasture-raised operations. As you move up this ladder, your capital expenditure per bird shifts from mechanical infrastructure, like automated manure belts and climate control, to physical land footprint and labor intensity. A conventional cage system might pack a bird into 67 square inches, whereas a pasture-raised model requires 108 square feet per hen. You are trading mechanical efficiency for premium consumer positioning. But as every experienced producer knows, higher retail prices do not automatically translate to higher net margins. Once you factor in mortality, land costs, and feed conversion losses, the trap for most aspiring operators begins long before the first chick arrives. It is called the empty barn trap. To build a modern, biosecure 50,000 bird layer facility from scratch, the entry price is brutal. You aren't just buying a shed, you are constructing a fully sealed, positive pressure biocontainment unit equipped with industrial climate control, automated egg collection conveyors, multi-tier nesting systems, high-capacity manure drying infrastructure, and industrial backup generators. Before you even flock the house, you are staring at millions in upfront capital. Environmental impact permits, nutrient management compliance, water rights allocations, and specialized deep well installations can consume hundreds of thousands of dollars before a single foundation is poured. Add in specialized egg washing, grading, and cold storage refrigeration units, which must maintain strict temperature bands to satisfy federal food safety regulations, and your fixed capital outlay per bird space easily hits $30 to $45 before accounting for the flock itself. Once that capital is sunk, you face an immediate operational crossroad, the pullet financing decision. Hens don't hatch laying eggs. You either have to construct pullet rearing facilities to raise chicks from day 1 to week 16, absorbing 4 months of feed and energy costs with zero revenue, or you contract with specialized pullet rearers to buy point-of-lay pullets at 16 to 18 weeks old. Buying ready-to-lay pullets preserves capital footprint, but locks in high non-negotiable cash costs right at the start of every production cycle, tying up hundreds of thousands of dollars in floating working capital. This brings us to the geographic non-negotiables of layer farming. An egg farm cannot simply exist anywhere land is cheap. Your location is bound by a strict 3-vector constraint: feed source proximity, rendering processing access, and retail logistics radius. Feed accounts for up to 70% of your total operational expenditure. If your farm is positioned 50 miles too far from a major grain terminal or feed mill, the added freight cost per ton will systematically erode your profit margin until you are bankrupt. Simultaneously, you must be within a tight delivery radius of major distribution hubs or breaking plants. Liquid egg processors and grocery chain logistics networks operate on razor-thin delivery windows. If your farm is isolated, diesel surcharges and reefer transport costs will swallow whatever premium you thought you were earning. Choosing the wrong 20-mile radius isn't just a minor operational inconvenience, it is a structural defect in your business model that guarantees eventual insolvency. Now let's peel back the curtain on the economic paradox that drives the core engine of this business, the biological feed conversion ratio, combined with the spot market pricing mechanic. On the consumer side, an egg is an egg, but financially, a flock is a decaying biological asset, running against a strict biological clock. A pullet comes into lay around week 18, hits peak production of roughly 95% lay rate between weeks 24 and 32, and then enters a steady, irreversible biological decline in both production rate and shell quality. Here is where the unit economics get ruthless. A typical commercial layer consumes roughly 0.24 to 0.26 pounds of feed per day. That feed is a precise chemical blend of corn for energy, synthetic amino acids, and soybean meal for protein, alongside limestone for calcium carbonate shell synthesis. If corn prices spike 20% due to a drought or geopolitical event, your daily operating cost jumps instantly, but you cannot dial back the feed ration without causing the hens to cease egg production or drop shell density, leading to cracked, unsellable eggs. Let's look at the baseline math. If a hen consumes 0.25 pounds of feed per day at a feed cost of $400 per ton, her daily feed cost is exactly 5 cents. If she lays an egg every 26 hours, yielding an average lay rate of 85% across her 60-week productive cycle, that single egg carries a raw feed cost of roughly 5.8 cents. Now add labor, electricity for ventilation, water, packaging, carton printing, mortality loss, and pullet amortization, which adds another 3 to 4 cents per egg. Your total baseline cost to produce a single dozen conventional eggs lands right around $120 to $135, when the wholesale spot market drops to $1.10 a dozen. During cyclical oversupply, you are paying 20 cents per dozen for the privilege of staying in business. And unlike a factory that can shut down assembly lines when prices collapse, a flock of 200,000 hens does not have an off switch. They will lay 200,000 eggs today, 200,000 tomorrow, and 200,000 the day after. If you run out of cooler space, you are forced to dump inventory into the low-value liquid egg-breaking market at pennies on the dollar. This perishability dynamic makes cash flow management hyper-volatile. Across the annual calendar, the egg market suffers from extreme, predictable seasonality spikes and brutal post-holiday crashes. Demand surges dramatically in Q4 ahead of holiday baking, peaks hard around Easter, and then plunges into a dead zone during the mid-summer months, when ambient temperatures rise and consumer cooking habits shift away from hot breakfasts and baked goods. Amateur producers get completely wiped out during these summer lulls. In June and July, two things happen simultaneously. Wholesale egg prices hit their annual troughs, while heat stress forces farms to run massive ventilation fans and evaporative cooling pads 24 hours a day, driving power bills through the roof. At the same exact time, high heat depresses bird appetite, reducing egg size from large to medium and dropping wholesale value per unit even further. If an operator spends their Q4 profits without setting aside massive cash reserves, the summer burn rate will sink them. To survive these structural shocks, operators face a key strategic choice: operate as an independent producer selling on the spot market versus joining a marketing cooperative or entering a contract growing arrangement with an integrated producer like Cal-Maine or Rose Acre Farms. Contract growing operates much like the broiler industry. The corporate integrator owns the birds, supplies the feed, provides veterinary care, and pays the grower a predictable, fixed fee per crate or per square foot of housing. This insulates the farmer from grain price spikes and wholesale market crashes. However, it strips away all upside potential, leaves the farmer holding millions in long-term debt for the physical facilities, and forces them into a continuous cycle of forced equipment upgrades dictated by the integrator. If you choose the independent route, you retain the upside during market spikes, but you are completely naked against the operational frictions that destroy margins behind closed doors. Consider the hidden operational liabilities that never show up in agricultural college textbooks. Regulatory compliance, flock disposal, manure management, and biosecurity protocols. Take manure management. A flock of 100,000 birds produces metric tons of high nitrogen waste daily. You cannot simply pile it up outside. Environmental regulations mandate strict, lined storage pits, air scrubbing technology, and specific seasonal application windows to prevent runoff into watershed systems. If you don't own enough surrounding acreage to spread the manure at agronomically approved nitrogen rates, you have to pay haulers to truck it away, converting what should be an organic fertilizer byproduct. into a massive cash drain. Then there is the nightmare scenario that keeps every poultry farmer awake at night. Highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI. A single wild duck flying over your facility can shed virus particles into an intake vent, or track it onto the property via a vehicle tire. Once HPAI is detected in a barn, the entire flock must be euthanized immediately under government order. While federal indemnity programs may partially reimburse the market value of the destroyed birds, they do not cover months of lost income, facility downtime, deep sanitation costs, or the catastrophic cost of restocking pullets into a frozen supply chain. This structural fragility is clearly illustrated by high-profile industry failures and corporate consolidations over the past 2 decades. Look at the trail of mid-sized independent egg producers across North America that vanished or were swallowed up during the market shifts of the late 2010s and early 2020s. Companies that leveraged heavily to transition from conventional cages to cage-free systems, driven by corporate welfare promises from major grocery and fast food chains, found themselves crushed when consumer willingness to pay the premium failed to keep pace with operational cost increases. When retail chains delayed their cage-free deadlines or demanded lower wholesale contract pricing, heavily leveraged mid-sized operations were trapped. They were carrying massive debt service on state-of-the-art cage-free housing, but receiving prices barely above conventional spot rates. The resulting margin squeeze triggered a massive wave of consolidation, proving that in this industry, capital expenditure forced by buyer mandates, without long-term price guarantees, is a direct path to corporate execution. So how does a modern egg facility actually survive and generate net profit? It relies entirely on strict unit economics and high-margin upsells or byproduct monetization. The basic operational break-even formula for a layer house isn't just revenue minus expenses. It is calculated as break-even price per dozen equals fixed debt service, plus total labor, plus utilities, plus pullet depreciation, divided by total dozen produced, plus feed cost per dozen. Because the baseline product, a standard grade A large white egg, frequently trades near cost, survival requires maximizing secondary profit streams. Modern large-scale facilities install spent hen processing lines or contract with pet food manufacturers to monetize birds at the end of their 70-week laying cycle, turning what used to be a disposal cost into a minor cash yield. They invest in on-site pelletizing plants to dry, compress, and bag poultry manure, selling it as high-value certified organic fertilizer to specialty row crop farmers at $60 to $90 a ton. Furthermore, they aggressively segment their flock, converting a portion of production to specialty designer eggs, such as omega-3 enriched, pasture-raised, or pasture-rotational organic, where the retail markup jumps by 200%, while production costs only increase by 40 to 50%. Let's look at the financial realities under 2 distinct operational scenarios. For a mid-scale 100,000 bird independent layer operation, in an optimistic scenario where grain prices remain stable at baseline averages, HPAI outbreaks trigger temporary spot market price surges, and the farm maintains a balanced mix of 70% contract retail sales and 30% spot market upside. The numbers look incredible. The facility produces roughly 2.4 million dozen eggs annually, at an average realized wholesale price of $2.10 per dozen, against a fully burdened production cost of $1.35 per dozen. The gross margin sits at 75 cents per dozen. That yields $1.8 million in gross annual profit. After deducting debt service on a $3 million facility loan, equipment maintenance, insurance, and administrative costs, the net owner take-home pay can top $800,000 to $1.1 million annually. Under these conditions, it looks like the best business on earth. Now let's run the realistic scenario, where minor operational frictions compound simultaneously. Grain prices rise 15% due to regional supply shortages. A minor heat wave drops the flock's average lay rate from 85% down to 78%, while shifting the egg size distribution down toward mediums. Simultaneously, a local market oversupply depresses average spot prices to $1,028 per dozen, while your electric bill spikes 30%. To keep the ventilation fans running, your total production cost per dozen rises to $148 due to feed price spikes and lower total yield, but your average gross revenue per dozen drops to $125. Suddenly, you are losing 23 cents on every single dozen eggs your flock produces. On 2.2 million dozen eggs, that is a direct operational cash burn of over $500,000 in a single year, because you still owe $350,000 in annual principal and interest payments on your capital facilities. Your net cash position collapses by nearly $1 million in 12 months. The barn is still full of activity. The trucks are still rolling out of the driveway every morning, and the grocery store shelves are fully stocked with your product. But underneath the surface, the enterprise is hemorrhaging capital at a rate that will force liquidation within 2 quarters. What this dual scenario reveals is the fundamental truth of the egg industry. Success in this business is not determined by how well you care for animals, nor is it determined by how clean your barns look to a visiting retail buyer. Survival in the layer business is dictated entirely by financial hedging discipline, relentless control over feed conversion ratios, and the cold, unyielding reality of risk management. It is a game played on a razor's edge, where a fraction of a cent per egg is the absolute distance between wealth creation and total bankruptcy.